Hi, Stephen here for the Idiot Quilter, and here's another interview in my series of interviews with subscribers. Enjoy. So, this another in our series of the Idiot Quilter interviews with people who you've never met, maybe, or maybe you have, but they're not professionals. Not really in the term of what professional is, but that doesn't matter that their art form is any less than a professional's, because it's not. In fact, a lot of cases, it's better. So this is Linda Mielke. And Linda, where do you live?
I live about an hour outside of Toronto in Simcoe County.
Oh, so you're native Canadian. I didn't realize that when I found your website or your YouTube channel. And in fact, even better, because I really do want to concentrate on Canadian, our own people as well. So yeah, so we're close to each other, really about an hour away, probably. I'm in Oshawa. So, all right. So great. So Linda, how long have you been quilting and sewing?
Well, I'll tell you the story. I grew up in a rural area outside of Stratford.
Okay.
In the 1950s, I was a little kid.
So was I.
So there you go. And rural Ontario, we had a dairy farm. And my grandparents lived on part of the farm, and my other grandparents lived on another part of the farm. And we had like a little corner unit of family. So I was always going back and forth with everybody around the corner.
Right.
So my one cousin embroidered, and she was teaching me embroidery. And that's where I started in the 1950s with embroidery.
And it led to everything else.
A lot of things. Yes, it led to a lot of things.
So when would you have made your first quilt?
This is my first quilt.
Oh yeah, you got to show it for us. Okay, that's wonderful.
It's embroidered. It was that stuff that you ironed on to fabric.
Right.
And you could reuse the stencils over and over and over again. So it's all embroidered and it's hand quilted, and I embroidered those things and I hand quilted it before I was 13.
Oh, gee. Okay. So
and it was on my bed for the longest time. And when I went away to university, I had a fold-out sofa bed. And it ripped to shreds.
Oh, geez.
So it hasn't been fixed yet.
Yeah. Well, there's still time.
There's a lot of fixing that needs to take place with that.
But it's
I've
nice.
added extra bindings, and I've added extra things all over the place.
But it's nice that you have your very first quilt, though, too, you know. And
yeah, I kept it.
It would probably be a nice thing to hand down to somebody too, if you've got somebody to hand it down to. No, nobody appreciates it.
Nobody would want it. Nobody would want it.
I know. Don't you hate that?
Quality things they get now.
Yeah, I know that. Well, don't get me started on all of that. But okay, so I think you've now answered my next question, what was how you got started.
Yes.
So let's move right into what, did you have any family or relative influences in your life as well that got you into this?
Well, we had a treadle sewing machine, you know, the foot thing that went up and down.
Yes.
No electricity. My mom did just mending of coveralls and work pants. That was her length of sewing, and that's all she wanted to do. She didn't want to do any more sewing than that. So my mom was not an influence on my sewing abilities. I did, however, take 4-H homemaker clubs. And the 4-H homemaker clubs was probably the way I learned how to sew.
Right. Okay. So.
And then I did take home ec in grade 9.
Oh, okay.
So I took home ec in grade 9.
So essentially then, would you say you're primarily self-taught?
I would say a lot of it is self-taught, yes.
Yeah. I think that's how a lot of us get, that don't have people in our families that sew, how we get started. My mother sewed a little bit. She had a treadle machine, but she only used it occasionally to make clothes for herself and for my sister. And she didn't really like sewing. and she never did any more of it. So yeah, I didn't get influenced there. And
No.
one of her mother did quilt. I have several of her quilts. But I wasn't interested in that kind of stuff when I was that age, much younger. And so I never paid any attention to what she was doing. It didn't mean anything to me then, like it does now.
I think most of it is recycling and reusing. And also because of the fact that we didn't have a whole lot of access to money. There wasn't a lot of that. We were very thrifty, I think. So it was out of necessity that I started to sew clothes, because my mom used to get my clothes out of the Eaton's catalog once a year. Once a year, I'd get 2 pair of corduroy pants, 2 dresses to wear to school, and 2 sweaters. And if they were worn out before the end of the year, you had to mend them and fix them up. So, I mean, that was the way things were. My closet was an egg carton, you know, those egg crates.
Yes.
Wooden egg crates that you could layer eggs in up and stack them up. So I had 3 of those in my bedroom, 1 for beside the bed and 2 with a board across it, which was my desk.
Made use of everything. Now today that would be considered trendy, you know.
That's what we had.
Well, that's see the young people today. And when I say young people, I'm talking about people like possibly even their 30s and the 40s. They're just too used to going into a store and buying what they want with it. They don't realize how, you know, out of the catalog. Yeah, my mother ordered a lot of our clothes out of the catalog. That was just the way it was done. Okay, so let's go on to what's your favorite creation and why, if you have one.
Well, it is actually an item of clothing that I made for myself. And when I started going to high school in Stratford, I could walk to the fabric stores at my lunch break.
Right.
And I bought a piece of fabric that was a creamy white, which never on a farm do you ever wear anything creamy white. And it had a gold stripe going through. It was sort of a nubby gold stripe going through it, and it made a window pane check.
Okay.
Gold. It was lovely. It was the most beautiful fabric I've ever seen in my life. So I bought some of that and I made a dirndl skirt, and I made a jacket to go with it that was double-breasted, and I made a beret, and all the checks were all lined up everywhere. It was just magnificent. And I bound the buttonholes and I covered the buttons. It was just the most beautiful thing I ever had in my whole life.
Do you still have it?
No.
It's kind of a shame.
It is. And I don't have a photo of it either, because my mom didn't have a brownie then.
Oh, okay.
So it was one of those times that you just didn't have access to a camera.
Yeah, true. It's kind
of. But I remember wearing that. Oh, I just felt like a queen.
It sounds like you would, because I mean, all that work.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't sew
fun.
garments, but my husband does, and I know it. Covered buttons, doing the buttonholes by hand.
Buttonholes, not just machine made, bound buttonholes.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
It was just lovely.
Yeah.
So I used to sew a lot of clothing.
Right.
And that was sort of the thing that I used to do. And really, I didn't quilt.
No,
I made a quilt, but I wouldn't consider that quilting.
And why is that?
Because it was just necessity.
I see.
It wasn't a hobby or anything like that. It was just a necessity. And all the quilts on the beds in our house were layers of old woolen garments or old blankets, or they were nothing but utilitarian, and they weighed a ton. So you had that thing on top of you, and it didn't matter if the furnace didn't have a pipe coming through your room, or you were in a cold room. It didn't matter, because you just got under that thing and you couldn't move anyway. So
That reminds me of the days of my grandmother's house. Same thing. The room we slept in did not have a pipe
Didn't have
going
a
in.
furnace.
And
No.
we were under all kinds of these old quilts that were utilitarian quilts, just the same thing. And I remember the weight. Now people pay big money for a weighted blanket for some reason. So there you are. Okay, so let's move on to what type of quilter or sewer would you describe yourself as? Traditional, modern?
Well, I consider myself more of an anarchist quilter.
Okay, you're going to have to explain that.
Well, I steal ideas from anywhere and I do anything I want to because I don't really care what anybody thinks.
So quilt police are not in your world.
No, they're not. They were when I moved where I'm living now. I joined a quilt guild. Mm-hmm. I'll talk about that when you ask me the question, but
yeah.
That's when I learned that quilting becomes more than just necessity and out of thrift. So all the quilts that I used to make when I was just living on my own and just doing my own thing were very interesting. They were nice quilts. There was nothing wrong with them. And they certainly served a purpose. But they weren't decorative or extravagant in any way. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I know what you mean. We're going to come to the guild in a minute. But okay, so I like the terminology, though, that you used, quilting anarchist.
Yeah.
I think you should.
So there we go.
I think you should change the name of your YouTube channel to that. I think that would make it stand out. Okay.
Well, I'm really thinking that when the pandemic is over, we can go back to regular things. I'm not going to do YouTube anymore.
Oh, geez, I don't know. You should.
I just do it once a month, like a workshop type thing. For people in our guild. So I don't know if I will continue it at all.
Well, you should consider it because once you get hooked into it, it's, well, I'm one to talk because I'm hooked. Okay, so I can see you have a sewing area or room or something. So do you want to tell us about your sewing area?
Sure. I have IKEA desks. They're just put together and it's in the basement. We're in the basement here. Okay. And I have just a U-shaped, I can move my camera around.
Yeah, sure. That would be.
Because it's just handheld and you see my hand too. So I have, there you go.
Yeah.
Sewing machine. I have Janome sewing machine. Yeah. And that's the one that I piece everything on. And I have another sewing machine, which is Janome 89 double knot, I guess. Yeah. It's got a wider throat.
Yeah.
And I took it upstairs to the dining room and put it on the dining room table during the pandemic because I'll turn it to me here, please. I put it upstairs on the dining room table because I just needed to see something other than the basement.
Right.
I can look out the window and I can see cars going by and I can see things. So yeah. So I took it upstairs. Anyway, so there's my sewing machine and I piece everything on that sewing machine. And then around here I have just some bins where I have little things stored like pressing items and some scissors and things. And those are all the rulers I have right there.
Yeah.
Three
rulers.
4 rulers, maybe. Yeah, that's it. And then I decorate my wall with things that I played with and made.
Yeah.
Just fun things. I like birds, so I make a lot of bird things. Yeah. There we go. Bird things. I like bird things, so I make a lot of things with birds.
I'm that way with butterflies.
Yeah. And over here is where I store my fabric. I have 2 shelves. There I go. I have 2 shelves. That one has bins, little bins, and they have mainly fat quarters. And they used to be arranged by color.
Oh, yeah.
And then I have a filing cabinet at the bottom, and that's got all my household inventories and things like that, income tax and stuff.
Oh,
and on
right.
top of that is 3 bins, and the bottom one are orphan blocks.
Mm-hmm.
The middle one is solids, and the top one is thread.
Okay.
And then over here, I have my other shelf, and that's the fabric that I tend to buy. And the
Right.
top shelf is whites and black, so neutrals. And then the second shelf is not fat, wide backs.
Yeah.
And then I have things that are over 1 meter long in bright colors and lots of pattern, because that's the type of thing that I buy.
Yeah.
The color, lots of pattern, because I am the person in my guild that whenever somebody has to get rid of something,
Yeah.
they give it my way. And so I get a lot of scraps. I get bags and bags and bags of scraps sometimes. So under my desk, I'll go around this way. Zoom, zoom, zoom. You're going to have editing to do.
Yeah.
There you go. Under my desk, I have bins, and they are scraps down there. And those I would consider less than fat quarters. And I have them coordinated by color.
Well
and
organized.
then I have here just crumbs.
Yeah.
Crumbs. And that's what I've got.
Yeah. Well, you've got a nice sewing area. You've got lots of space. Now, that brings up the question, when you quilt your quilts, do you do them on your domestic machine?
Yes, I do. The one, the Janome,
the 8900?
8900.
Yeah.
And I do that upstairs, either on the kitchen counter. I have not an island, but it's kind of a bump out with whatever.
Right.
So I can stand and quilt. Okay. And sometimes that's easier because I have some arthritis, some osteoporosis issues. Yeah. So I can stand and I can quilt that way, or I just at the dining room table. Yeah. And it's big enough that I don't have to worry about, hauling it over and hauling it over and trying to get it to stay on the table. So I learned really early that if I'm going to do this as a hobby, once I retired, I had to either have a lot of money put into it, or I would just do it myself. And so I've tried to do it myself.
Yeah, I do my own too. And although I'm still learning, because I haven't been quilting near as long as you, I've only been quilting for about 4 years. And I just finished quilting one, doing some free motion in that, but I'm still at the very basic level of that. But I refuse to go off and have somebody else quilt it for me, because I don't feel that is mine, right? So yeah, I'd love to have a long arm someday, but for now I'm managing on I have Janomes as well. So I have like the M7.
Them. They're very nice. And I also, I forgot what I was going to say.
Well, that's okay. It'll come back to you.
It'll come back. Yeah.
So
I like the idea of finishing my own quilts too.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah. Then I can say there may be mistakes in it, but it's mine.
They're mine.
It's mine. Yeah. So what's your favorite tool or technique? Something you can't live without or you always reach for?
I guess I always have music playing.
Oh, okay.
I like to listen to a lot of tunes. I have my tunes going full blast when I'm sewing, and I have a lot of fun singing along.
Yeah. Well, but that's good.
As far as quilting tools, I don't really I'm not a tool person. Scissors and a rotary cutter, and I don't have that many rulers.
So no, you said you only have about 3 rulers.
I have a square 12.5-inch square, and I have a 6.5-inch square, and I have a long ruler. And if I need to try something different, I will borrow something.
Right. I think when I first got into quilting, I think all people who first get into quilting, you go nuts on the rulers. I know I did, and I've got probably 30 rulers, which most of them I never touched. They were for a project, never used them for anything else again. So yeah, you don't need that many. But when you're new to it, you don't know what you're doing.
That's
and
right.
You get caught up with the spending kind of a thing. So if you had all the money in the world, speaking of spending, is there a piece of equipment you would like to invest in?
Well, I was thinking about this for the longest time yesterday, and it came to me when I was out walking. I would invest in air purifiers for all of the meeting rooms that I used to go to. The church hall where we had our meetings with the guild, the church hall where we get together as a group and sew, and the place where we have our meetings with, like, I would buy air purifiers so we could get back together again. That's what I would invest in. I don't care if I have stuff for myself, but I would really like to get together with the people that are my friends and I quilt with.
Not exactly what I thought you would say, but that's okay. That's a very interesting spin on that question. So
I think I'm a giver. I like to make things and give them away. And I've always sort of had that 10% rule ever since I was a kid. And so if I make 100 quilts, 30 of them go out the door somewhere, if I make 100 quilts, 30 of them.
We talked earlier about you belonging to a guild. Yes. So is that your chief sort of group to go to for things, or do you have other groups you might belong to, or online things?
I like the guilds that I belong to. And so when I moved to Simcoe County, I retired from where I was living on the shores of Lake Huron, blah, blah, blah. And I worked there for many years. But when I retired, I decided to move to Simcoe County. My daughter lives in Durham County. So it's half the distance to go to visit her and the grandchildren.
Yeah.
So that was nice. And also it was just a new place to explore. So where I'm living, I was walking down the street one night and I just happened to see all these people carrying things into the church down the street. Like they had buckets and bins of stuff. So I walked through the parking lot and I saw that it was all fabric, and that really made me excited. What are you doing with all this fabric? Oh, we've got a quilt guild meeting tonight. And I said, what's a quilt guild? So they said, well, you could pay $5 and come into the meeting. So I did. I went into the meeting and I sat down, and everybody said, hi, how are you? Who are you? And that stuff, chatter. And the president stood up and introduced the fact that here we have the meeting and we have guests and we have this and that. And they did a little business and they said, now it's the prime time to shop. It was a in Quilt Guild meeting shop hop. So I paid $5 to go and watch people shop. And I thought, is that what they do at quilt guilds? And I was quite disappointed. I thought that was not what I expected. And I sort of went slumping out, and the woman said, where are you going? Where are you going? And I said, well, I don't want to shop. I just thought I'd see something about quilts and say, oh, come back next month. We've got a speaker. You can use your $5 next month. Here, have it back, she said. So I went back the next month and they had speakers, and it also was election night. And nobody was volunteering to be on the executive. I said, well, if I'm going to come to this place, I'm going to be on the executive. So without even being a member, I put my hand up and I said, I'll do that job. What job do you need done? So I became the newsletter editor without even being a member.
Okay.
And I was the newsletter editor. So, and that's the best way to get involved ever, because everybody comes to you and everybody talks to you and everybody says something to you.
Yeah.
And you get on the executive and everybody wants to know what's going on and you meet everybody.
Yeah.
And as a newsletter editor, I had everybody's names, everybody's addresses, I had their emails, I had their phone numbers. If I ever needed anything, I knew who to contact.
Right.
And they were really very helpful.
No, that's good.
That was, I've had very positive experiences with guilds, but I've always joined.
Yeah.
I've always done something. I never just sit back and not do anything.
No, and that's what so many people do when you, in any organization, not just the guild.
They feel like they don't belong.
Yeah, that's right. You have to make yourself belong.
That's right. And then you become indispensable.
Exactly.
And everybody knows you.
Yeah, that's right.
And everybody calls your name.
Yeah. And sometimes that's not a good thing, but
and if you let it be known that you like doing scrap quilting, when anybody's cleaning out Aunt Bertha's kitchen that she passed away and the fabric, you get it.
You get it. An endless supply for free.
I have an endless supply of fabric.
Yeah. Well, I could see that. You could shop your stash for sure in there. But speaking of shopping, what's your favorite store for supplies and materials, either a brick and mortar or an online store?
Okay, so maybe when I need some batting, I order online and it comes to the door. And I order a roll.
Yep.
So I get a roll at a time, and I've been ordering it from Dinky Doo.
I've got a pre-order in for a roll of batting from them.
And it was very good. And it comes to the door, and I don't have to try getting it into my little car.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to buy batting just on a little package.
No, I know what you mean.
So I buy a roll of batting at a time. And I used to buy my thread from Anita Zobens. But she's retired now, and so I have to find my her replacement and start ordering thread from them.
So
I buy batting, and I buy thread, and I buy fabric for backings. I like to have nice backings. Yeah. The front of my quilts are all donations, pretty much. And I find ways of using what I get in creative ways, I must say.
Yeah. So when you buy fabric, do you buy it principally online then?
No, I never buy fabric. I've never bought fabric online.
Oh, okay. I've been doing that a lot lately.
Start.
Yeah, actually, a lot of people don't want to do that because they want to feel the fabric and things like that. But I've had some good luck during this COVID thing with ordering fabric online. But I still like to go into the store too and look at it all and that kind of thing as well. So in your area, then, do you have a favorite store that you go to for fabric?
There are lots of wonderful quilting stores in the Barrie area. And around here, and there's great shop hops, and there's wonderful quilting community around here. Yeah. And I just buy things that I don't know. I used, when I was starting to quilt, and that was around. Oh, thank you.
Oh, you have a servant.
Oh, come here for a minute. Do you recognize the fabric?
Yes.
Northcott.
Yep.
Lovely.
I think I bought some of that one time.
He loves that shirt.
Yeah. Well, it's a nice shirt.
Custom made.
Custom made, yes. The best kind. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
But when I buy fabric, I used to go to quilt shows, and there'd be people there with fabric to sell. And because I generally just want wide backs, or I want really brightly colored, ugly, mainly what I would call ugly fabric, because that's what people call it. I go to discount places.
Oh, okay.
And I buy a lot of fabric there. And because I'm only buying backs, and most of the quilts that I make, I give away.
Okay, so
so I don't want to invest a lot of quality money that I can use for other things.
Yes, true.
Like eating. And
food. Yeah. Unfortunately, paying taxes. Yeah. So who are your favorite experts or sources for information?
Well, there you go. You have me there because I had to look on the internet to find some names that I might recognize. because I don't surf the internet very much.
Okay.
I don't have that sort of liking.
Right.
I stay away from the computer a lot. I like going to guild meetings, and I like the speakers that I listen to.
Right.
A lot. So when I go on a holiday, I find a guild meeting somewhere.
Oh.
And my husband liked to go to the UK. And so I started going to guild meetings in the UK whenever we were in Britain.
Right.
And some of the people there know me now because I've been to a number of their meetings. And so I met Lynn Edwards.
Oh, yeah.
Do you recognize her name? She does a lot. Cathedral Windows.
Yes.
Bust Your Stash. She was a speaker at one of the meetings I went to.
Oh, wow.
And I really admired her attitude towards quilting. She's a machinist. She's not a hand sewer. I'm a machinist. I'm not a hand sewer. I don't want to do any hand sewing. I hate applique. I detest sewing anything by hand. Everything I do is machine. And she also said, have nice backs on your quilt, because it's like a pretty lady. You see her coming, but you really like to see her going too.
Yeah.
So you want to have something interesting on the back. And I believe that too. I always thought that was an important thing.
Yeah.
And the third thing that I took away from that conversation with her was steal from anybody. If you like something, do it. Be an anarchist, so give yourself permission to do whatever you want to do. And if you really care what other people think about your quilts, well, then you might want to become more precise or do things in a way that is going to be pleasing to other people. But if you just want to like what you do and have fun.
Yep. I think there's two types of quilters in the world. The ones who do it for the experience and those that do it for the competition. And I agree with you. I do whatever I want to do, what I feel like doing at that time. And if it's not perfect, it's not perfect.
It's not perfect,
So, yeah. So that takes me to, do you have any challenges or goals for the future in terms of projects you might like to do, or?
My goal is to sew my stash. And because it grows all the time, I have a never-ending source of material that I haven't chosen.
Right.
That other people chose and discarded. And so that can be a challenge. You have to sort of leaf through all the litter and sort it into compatible piles and figure out what to do with it. So I like challenges. I love putting stuff together that people come back and say, oh, there's the piece of fabric I gave you. There's something I gave you. There's something I gave you. This quilt that's on the back behind me.
Yeah.
I put it up there. I dug it out of my storage unit because it was really the first sew day workshop I went to with a guild.
Okay.
And I had myself a little sack of scraps and a bit of solid color fabric. And I sewed away, and I was crazily sewing away, and I ran out of fabric by lunchtime. And I looked around at what everybody else was doing, and I walked up and down and just sort of looked at, see what they're doing, And they have these big long rulers, and they're zipping along with their rotary cutters and flinging things off to the side. And I looked in the garbage can, and there's like all this fabric that they've discarded. And I couldn't believe it. So I sort of walked by the garbage can every once in a while, picked something out, sewed it into my project. So those zigzaggy lines and those things, and the thing that's down the side, people were throwing them out in the garbage cans. And so by the end of the day, I had 2 or 3 more blocks made, and they were out of the garbage can from the workshop.
Yeah.
And they said, okay, show what you've done today. And I held up my blocks and they said, that's my fabric. And that's my fabric. And that's my fabric. Where did you get that? And I said, well, it was in the garbage. I took it out and I used it. So half of 3 of those squares up there came out of the garbage that people threw away that day.
So there you are. You're already into recycling.
I was into recycling long before that, but that was my first sort of endeavor at a guild meeting, I think, that somebody actually noticed. And I guess I've always been the kind of person that maybe I didn't fit in, you know. Maybe I was the one that would never be chosen to be in the A group of quilting this for a donation quilt for the guild.
Right.
Because my ideas were not the same as everybody else's, because all the little bird things on there, you know, they're all just, you know, I just have little notebooks like that.
Yeah.
And I do a little drawing and then I make it.
Well, that's neat. I'm glad. I wish I could do that. I try, but I'm not very good at that part of it, but I'm trying to get better at that. So that brings me to the question.
That's how I do things. So when I started, I don't know, you can't see that.
Yep, there it is. That's
when
good.
I started doing free motion stitching, I did it on paper first. I did doodling on paper. And then I just followed what I did with my pencil on paper. So
that's what they recommend for learning free motion, is to do that, to do the doodling. So really, my next question really falls nicely into this, because how would you describe yourself as an artist? Because I consider anybody who does anything that's creative an artist. Yes. So how would you describe yourself besides being an anarchist?
Well, beside that, I don't know. I get lots of inspiration from fabric. I really like the look of fabric when I'm making quilts. So I save pieces of things, like I save that piece of fabric, but that would make an exciting full-size quilt.
Yeah.
But it was just a piece of fabric that came in a bag that somebody gave me. And I look at things like these things, I save them because the color combinations intrigued me. And when I pick out colors for a quilt, I really like this sort of blues and those colors together.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I would make a quilt. If it looks nice in fabric, it's going to look nice as a quilt out of other fabrics.
Yeah.
So I don't know how I do what I do, but I usually just take a bag of fabric that somebody's given me, dump it on the floor, and start pulling things out.
Right.
And match it up with other things that I've got.
I would call you then an intuitive artist. I think that would be a good term, and probably a certain amount of experimentation as well.
Experimentation, yeah. Okay.
So that's why you're an artist.
Labels. I'm not good with labels, and I don't really look at labels on clothes. Like I couldn't tell you, and I couldn't tell you what brand of fabric something is unless I've actually bought it. I know Northcott because I have met people who work at Northcott. Yeah.
And you can't get more Canadian in fabric than Northcott. Right. I don't think. So my last question for you then, and everything you've said has been very interesting and inspiring. But what I'd like to know is, do you have any advice for anyone who may be getting started into quilting or sewing?
Yes, I do. And I wrote some things down because I thought I'd forget what I wanted to say.
That's okay. I write it all down too.
But I did. I made notes.
Okay.
Never compare your quilting to anybody else's.
Good Good advice.
There's no reason your style is your style. That's number one. There's always going to be someone who is a better sewer. There's always going to be somebody that you look at their quilts and admire, but don't compare yourself to other people. I don't think that's the way to go.
Yeah, I agree.
I think you need to be positive about your quilting. If you like the color, if you like the way it looks, then go with it. That's
Right.
what you do. And I also think joining groups is a great way to learn about what's available, what you can do, what other people do. I always learn something new every time I go to something that's a group.
Yeah.
And I really like belonging to guilds. That's something I really like. And don't give up. Don't doubt yourself. Negative thinking is like a fear of failure and procrastination and all that stuff.
Right.
I hear so many people say, I've got bags and bags and bags of UFOs. I don't have one UFO.
Oh, wow.
I start a quilt, I finish a quilt. I start the next one. I'm always eager to start the next quilt because I want to do something else. And I always hate when I sign up for block of the month because that goes on forever. But what I do is save the patterns and I make it all in the same week.
Yeah.
And I start it and I finish it. So that's my thing.
More power to you. I always prided myself when I first got into this that, same thing. I was not going to have any UFOs. Well, I do. I have only 5 and they just need to be quilted and I just have to get off my lazy butt. But, I move on from one project and go, ooh, now I want to do this, something else. So I'm like a squirrel,
I like the planning. I love the planning. Yeah. And I like the creativity part about putting things together because I really don't use patterns very much. I make patterns on pieces of paper. That's a pattern for a quilt I made.
Okay.
And it worked out really well.
Yeah.
And I make all kinds of stuff. Like here's a template.
Yep.
Foam core.
Yep.
And I've made 3 or 4 quilts with this.
Yeah, you see, you don't need to spend all that money on some things. You can get away with what you've got laying around.
I do. I make all kinds of stuff like that. And I like there was no pattern whatsoever for this behind here. There's no pattern for that over there. It's just a bunch of squares. I slice them, I put something in it, I do something else. Okay. These here, they're all things that were just strips and I sewed them together.
And that's what makes it all original to you. So, that's why I say you're an experimental, intuitive artist because you break outside of the mold, out of the box. So that's great. So before we end, is there anything else you'd like to say? I did want to mention the fact that you have a YouTube channel, and I'll be putting the link to that down in my show notes below as well. And I take it that if people come there, you said before you do them sort of like a tutorial?
Well, that's what I was starting with because I was organizing workshops for one of my guilds. And when the pandemic started, we thought as an executive on a Zoom meeting, Linda, why don't you do a tutorial or something on YouTube and put it on YouTube and people can follow along. So I looked at YouTube first. I don't know how to do that. So I tested it out and I just used my handheld device and it's pretty wavery. And people said, "Oh, your camera skills are lousy," but I'm just me, and I don't have tech background, so it's just that's the way it is, and I can't help it. So
Well, I've been watching some of your videos and I think they're pretty good. So,
well, thank you.
and very informative too. I've learned already from you. So, and that's,
Oh, well.
so I hope other people will take advantage of it. So I want to thank you so much for doing this interview. I mean, it was out of the blue because, as I said, this is my first time actually meeting you and talking with you. And I think this whole interview has just been great. There's just a wealth of information that you've presented. And thank you for showing us around your sewing room, because that's great. Love to see what other people's creative spaces look like, and your quilts too, which are all very unique and all very, very lovely. But I'm a sucker for bold colors too. So anyways, thank you so much for doing this. Now, I'm just going to stop the recording, but stay on the line for a minute.